Hello and welcome to session 3A, Community History in Minnesota During a Pandemic, What Comes Next? I'm Anita Doring and I'm a member of the MAC 2021 Program Committee. Before I turn it over to our session presenters, I'd like to go over a few logistical details. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available for viewing in approximately 2 weeks. Please use the Zoom Q&A feature to submit your questions. The session also has a chat feature enabled in which you're free to use to make comments or share relevant information to your colleagues, but do try and direct questions to the Q&A so they're not missed. The presenters will be looking more at the Q&A than the chat. I would also like to share MAC's expectations for conduct during this session. By participating in this session, you agree to engage respectfully with the presenter and other session participants. Any type of harassment or disruptive behavior is prohibited, including but not limited to abusive or derogatory comments, slurs or epithets, threats or acts of violence, intimidation, misgendering, or excessive comments not pertinent to the topic at hand. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the webinar, and if anyone engages in harassing or disruptive behavior, that person will be removed. So thank you ahead for following these guidelines. Finally, you are welcome and encouraged to share your conference experiences by way of social media, and I will be adding to the chat the suggested conference hashtags. And thank you. And now I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thank you, Anita, and welcome to Community History in Minnesota During a Pandemic, What Comes Next? Our presenters today will be Rebecca Ebnet Desens from the Anoka County Historical Society, Jenna Jacobs from the Hennepin County Library, Daardi Sizemore Mixon from Minnesota State University Mankato, and myself, Adam Smith from Minnesota State University Mankato too.
Hi, as Adam mentioned, my name is Daardi Sizemore Mixon. I'm a University Archivist at Minnesota State Mankato.
And I'm Adam Smith, Archives Technician at Minnesota State University Mankato.
Our presentation is Documenting a Pandemic, COVID-19 Community History Project. While Adam and I are presenting today, this project and presentation would not be possible without the work of our colleagues Heidi Southworth and Ann Stenzel. Today, I'll be providing an overview of our project and a little bit about its management. Adam will then share some project outcomes and next steps. A quick overview of where we come from. Minnesota State Mankato is the largest university in the Minnesota state system. We're located about 90 miles southwest of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, serve over 14,000 students studying in a wide range of programs. With materials dating back to 1868, the University Archives and Southern Minnesota Historical Center holds the records of the university and the surrounding region. Access to collections is available from our website through our growing digital collections. So first, I'll provide a little background about why we developed the project and how it's organized. In March 2020, as the global pandemic was declared and Minnesota State University Mankato moved to a remote learning and working environment, the University Archives considered how to document what was happening on campus and in the greater community. We started by collecting university communications and then contemplated ways to get personal experiences. Many historical societies and university archives started posting on social media about their goal to collect materials on the pandemic as well. In fact, it was a social media post by Amy Schindler at the University of Nebraska, Omaha that really got me thinking. At Minnesota State Mankato, we decided to utilize our existing oral history project expertise and develop the COVID-19 Community History Project. As outlined on this slide, the archives will collect, preserve, and provide access to these COVID-19 pandemic experiences for current and future researchers. In February, March, we started collecting official university communications to staff and students, such as emails, websites, and social media posts. As we looked beyond university communications, it became clear that the project could move beyond traditional oral histories. We expected that individuals may want to provide their experiences in a variety of ways, and as a result, broadened our project from an oral history project to something a little more uniquely named Community History Project. The archives identified examples of the types of formats we thought we would be open to collecting, including oral histories, self-interviews, journals, creative works. We also wanted to be open to any ideas that students might come up with. They come from all parts of the university and bring unique skills and experiences to the project. For example, Kaylee Cantu created a drawing entitled Cinco de Mayo, Fiesta Postponed, which spoke of her family finding new ways to celebrate this festival. We initially thought this project could be advertised to professors and we would get contributions from community members. As we started working out our details, we were approached by the Dean of Library and Learning about the need for remote work opportunities for student employees. We felt that this project could be an option. To date, we've actually had very few contributions from students in courses and very few from members of the community. That is primarily because the student worker component of the project became such a focus. Following spring break, the COVID-19 Community History Project became part of the work assignments of many student employees across campus. For international students laid off by the campus food service vendor and other contract vendors on campus, funding was provided by the Dean of Global Education to work on this project. Students began working in March and to varying degrees continued to work throughout the summer. Project funding wrapped in August, right before the new school year began. The next section is a little bit about our project management. The Archives has previously worked with our interns and graduate assistants conducting oral histories on our behalf, but we did not have any experience with managing such a large group of student employees for an Archives project. Add in the remote work component, and it became clear the Archives needed significant campus support. Thankfully, we had a number of individuals and departments step up to help. The project management group included the entire University Archives team. That sounds dramatic. There's 4 of us. And I was on sabbatical in spring. The Deans of Library and Learning and Global Education and staff from the Kearney Center for International Student Services, as well as our Student Financial Services Office. They, along with supervisors from across campus, began managing these student employees. Another thing that quickly became clear was the importance of our project website. Quickly is an important adjective here because much of this initial project setup and website creation happened over a 2-week time span alongside staff transitioning to working from home. The project website became the home to general information about the project, along with training for students and supervisors. We had a couple first-time supervisors in this group. The initial components of the site were set up by the end of March. We continued to make regular additions, particularly to the FAQs through April as the project really got underway. As part of this project, student employees did some or all of the following. They did training on how to conduct oral histories, conducted interviews, completed paperwork for donated materials, did weekly professional development readings and quizzes. They submitted personal reflections, did self-interviews, created artwork, poetry, photography, and they also interacted with their supervisors. I will say that for some students, their entire participation was through the professional development, understanding more about what it was to do oral histories. And then we had themes of professional development throughout the summer. Some just interviewed other people. Some decided they did everything. It really varied on the student's interest and what they felt most comfortable with. Technology was another integral part of our project team. We used LibGuides and LibWizard from SpringShare for our public-facing materials. The library has had LibApps for a while, and all of our Archives team members have used it. We considered our campus website, but quickly decided it didn't offer the flexibility we needed for the project. We used LibGuides to create our project website, which you can see on the screen here. Also, we used LibWizard, which is one of the apps, to create training quizzes and to do some of our online submission forms. LibGuides was a great tool. We were able to create project pages that could be quickly adapted and updated by all of us. And the few minor challenges are mostly operator error having to do with LibWizard. We anticipated that much of the project would be digital and need a way to identify and easily manage the submissions while working remotely. Pre-COVID, our main shared storage go-to was some campus shared drives, which is very handy, but we regularly came up on storage limits, plus they're tricky to access when off campus. The campus migrated to Office 365 in December of 2018, and we had been testing out Microsoft Teams. But in March 2020, Microsoft Teams became integral to the operations of our unit. We created a COVID-19 Community History Project team and used that for project documentation and submissions. The fact that each team, at least on our campus, came with a terabyte of cloud backed up storage really just makes me smile. We haven't been told yet that there's a limit on how many teams we can create. So it feels like some of our electronic storage issues are resolved, or at least better than they were pre-COVID. So I could go on about teams, but I won't. The challenges that we did identify with teams are you can only have one open at once, and we had some issues with some video file storage. So this is a screenshot of our team. Very exciting, I know. We used another tool called Move It Securely, which is more of a university approved version of Dropbox or something like that. And then we absolutely relied on a shared email that we could all access and check, particularly being from home, it was really important.
This project provided students an employment opportunity and created a rich collection of primary source materials for future researchers. Here's a look at the student employee participation in the project. We had student workers from several campus departments participate in the overall project. International student participation in the project grew over the summer because of classes being completed in advertising. Overall, we had approximately 124 individual unique students provide submissions. And that actually grew a little bit over the last week as a class submitted a bunch of materials lately. 18 different supervisors provided management of student employees, supervising between 5 and 20 student employees each. During the project, the archives team realized we needed to find new ways to encourage and provoke engagement and ideas for exploration in the projects. We encouraged students to reflect on the George Floyd murder and subsequent protests, both in Minnesota and worldwide during the summer of 2020. We also increased our professional development opportunities by providing weekly readings and a quiz so that students could improve their knowledge of the project activities. Here are some statistics on the, as of last week, 1,183 individual contributions we've received. That's gone up a few too now lately. We were amazed by the types and quality of oral histories and written reflections we received from the students as a part of this project. Their creativity was outstanding, including some of the drawings you're seeing here and on the next slide. Here are two examples of artwork created by the students. The drawing on the viewer's left was drawn by Joshua Lazarus and depicts a nurse in front of the United States flag. The painting on the viewer's right was created by Jacqueline Asplund and is entitled "We Can Beat This Together" and was created probably June, July of 2020. Students reflected on the COVID-19 pandemic and social justice movement, both in Minnesota and worldwide. They are drawing comparisons to past and current events. Interviews, both oral and written, occurred with people all over the United States and across the world. Students on the project were encouraged to conduct interviews in their first language and then provide translations of the interviews in the form of transcripts. This example is from a student conducting an interview in Spanish. They then created a written transcription in both Spanish and translated it into English. We'll also discuss some of our next steps and future plans for the collections and what we learned from the project. We plan to start processing this fall, but life, my wife and I had a baby in September, and COVID continued to happen. This isn't an easy processing project for a number of reasons. We are currently debating how to process a mostly digital collection with some physical components while also honoring the anonymity and restrictions requested by our contributors. We're also working to develop a plan to track contributors who participated in multiple ways across the project. One idea we've created is to assign numbers to our participants to track them across a project and allow future researchers to make connections. And this is especially important for individuals who maybe did an oral history in May and then again in August, or written reflections, those kinds of things, to kind of help track their progress and changing feelings during that course of that summer. We hope to use this project to help set up some best practices for digital sessioning and processing and enhance our digital preservation plan. We also surveyed the students who participated in the project to learn how the project impacted contributors and learn how to improve our resources and methodology for future projects. The survey helped us identify the most useful training materials and identify how to better organize our communication and documentation processes. Students wrote the following feedback. Participating in this project has helped me unearth many of my talents. For example, it has It has made me realize that I can write poems, journals, and draw very well, and I'm happy to unravel my talents. Another student wrote, the most positive aspect is the interaction with interviewees from different backgrounds and how the COVID pandemic has affected them. One of the biggest complications for the project was paying students to collect the oral histories and create other contributions. Payroll and project management, especially personnel management, became an overriding component for the archives team. Technology provided both innovation, such as using Zoom to conduct the oral histories and Otter.ai transcription software to do the transcriptions, but also created problems, mainly trying to do project management from a laptop with spotty internet. We did have a lot of successes, such as collecting COVID-19 project experiences and oral histories from a global perspective. We are also using this project as a framework for future collaborations and partnerships across the university and region. We reused our project framework to develop 2 new community history projects. The first is our #NoJustice, community history project that records personal experiences related to the social justice protests that began in the summer of 2020. The second is a Mankato Kiwanis 100th anniversary oral history project that documents the experiences of the Mankato Kiwanis Club and its history. We reused the website structure, training resources, submission forms, online submission forms, web-based tools, and the FAQ section. The project provided a lot of great benefits, both for us and the students who were involved in collecting the oral histories and/or doing creative projects. While we might not do a similar project to the same extent, we are interested in conducting future community history projects where we collect not only oral histories, but also written and creative project submissions. Please feel free to view this presentation available in Cornerstone, Minnesota State Mankato's institutional repository, and the Midwest Archives institutional repository later. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact us. We will now transition to Jenna Jacobs.
Thanks, Adam. Like Adam said, my name is Jenna Jacobs. I am the archivist for Hennepin County Library. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about our COVID-19 web archiving project. I'm going to start with a background about Hennepin County Library and web archives, if you are not familiar with either of those or one of those. And then I'm going to go through an overview of our project and finally talk about some of the ways that this project has led to innovations and changes already and some of the things we see coming in the future because of this project. So first, a brief introduction to the library. Hennepin County Library is the public library system for Minneapolis and suburban Hennepin County in Minnesota. We include 41 library locations across the county. You can see them on this map here. And they range from large urban libraries to small rural libraries. We serve 1.2 million county residents, and we cover 611 square miles, so pretty large, diverse county. Special Collections is located in downtown Minneapolis at the Minneapolis Central Library. We are the home for the rare books and archives of the library, and we have 4 full-time employees, plus wonderful project workers, interns, and volunteers when they're allowed back into the building. We have over 400 processed archival collections. Our finding aids are there if you want to take a peek. And we have an extensive digitization program, and our digital collections are there as well. So we collect local history in all of its formats: films, books, photographs, everything you'd expect. And increasingly over the last few years, we've been interested in web content and web archives. If you're not familiar, what is a web archive? Well, according to the SAA dictionary, web archives are preserved copies of live web content collected for permanent retention and access. To me, the key here is interactivity. Web archives, by this definition, could be screenshots, but our web archives are interactive captures of websites as they existed at a point in time in the past. Probably the most well-known example of web archives is the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine, which is where I pulled this beautiful version of the Minneapolis Public Library website from 1996. You might also have heard of Conifer or Archivit, among others. I will talk about both of those later in this presentation. Web archiving did exist at the Hennepin County Library before COVID, but it was small. We focused mainly on websites that had been donated to the library. These were a handful of blogs where the blog creator had donated the content for us to crawl, as well as the library's own website. This was primarily library building and renovation projects, material that existed on the library website, but then was taken down and didn't exist elsewhere. We had long-term plans of expanding our web archiving project, but it really wasn't a priority until COVID. So why did we decide to prioritize web archiving during COVID? Well, there are three main reasons. First was the growth of web content. Back a year ago, it can be kind of hard to remember, but everything was just going online in a way that it hadn't really, despite how prevalent the internet was in our lives. This included COVID plans and procedures, information about what was open and what was closed. There was this early fear in the pandemic, even of physical mail. Was it okay to touch your mail? Was it okay to have flyers or brochures? Everything was going to a web-based content, and everything was changing really quickly about services at institutions, and they were listed on websites. Second reason we decided to pursue this was social distancing. There was collection work we could do during the pandemic. We didn't have a shortage of work, but there weren't that many options for collecting and documenting the pandemic. We saw this web-based content as an area that we could do something that wasn't being done other places locally. And then finally, I already mentioned this, the ephemeral nature of the content. Everything was just changing so quickly. Businesses were changing their hours, what was open, what was closed was changing very rapidly. So it was something we wanted to capture quickly, web content, because we assumed that it would be changing. We also assumed that some of these businesses and institutions wouldn't survive the pandemic. So this was our chance to document their web existence before it perhaps didn't exist anymore. Big picture wise, I like to think of web archives in some ways as analogous to our vertical files or even our periodical collections of the past. These things that used to exist in hard copy newsletters are now online, and web archives are a way to capture that. We needed to act quickly, so we used what we already had, and that was Conifer, formerly Web Recorder. You might know it more by that name. I've listed here a bunch of information about this platform. I'm not going to read everything here, but a couple things that I wanted to pull out about why we really liked Conifer and why it worked well early in this project. First, it was free. There was free online storage for Conifer, which was wonderful for us. It was something we could get off the ground really quickly. And then secondly, we also really liked that it had downloadable work files. This is the ISO standard for web archive files. And what that meant for us was we could create these files now and we could maybe move them to a different platform in the future. It gave us that flexibility that they would be well maintained and that they'd be transferable later on. This is a peek at Conifer. If you haven't used it in the past, it's really straightforward. You copy paste the URL into that top bar there. You say what collection you want to add it to, and then you just click Start Capture. It'll load the website exactly as the website looks in real life, just with the Conifer header on top of it. And you click on everything that you want to archive. Everything you click on or load will be added to the archive. Anything you don't click on, any links you don't follow, won't be added to the archive. So it's really straightforward. All of our staff could learn it without much instruction or preparation at all. And we really enjoyed that about Conifer. What's in the archive then? Well, we began in March of 2020, and we have to date captured over 700 unique URLs. We've also done second crawls or third crawls of some, but we have over 700 websites. We've downloaded all of those work files that I mentioned, and we've created descriptive metadata for them. Our categories for this project are listed there. So we tried to capture a wide variety of materials that documented organizations and institutions that were changing rapidly or substantially in the pandemic and that had a lot of information up online. You can see everything from government, healthcare, places of worship. A lot of these changes were happening right when the big spring holidays were occurring last year. So we wanted to be sure to document those. School districts, private schools, restaurants, neighborhood organizations, and other public service organizations in the community as well. I'd like to show you an example of what this looks like. So this is the website of the Bachelor Farmer as it existed on April 8th of 2020. This is in our Conifer web archive. So you see that Conifer header up at the top there. Bachelor Farmer is a well-known local restaurant. It's often recognized as one of the best restaurants in Minnesota on national lists of well-recognized restaurants. And you'll see on April 8th, they were closed. They had this message up to their constituents that said that they were closed, but that they were helping with local food efforts. If we were to click out, to X out of this image here, you would be able to see the full website underneath it and interact with the website as it existed on April 8th, the parts that we captured. A month later, it looked different. So this is the website as it existed on May 1st, that same URL, bachelorfarmer.com, but you'll see it's very different. They had closed. This is within a day or two of the announcement from the restaurant that they were not going to reopen, that they were permanently closing. And that message is here, but the rest of the website is gone. There is no way to X out of this message. This is all that remains of the website. So that underlying website was no more, would have been lost perhaps entirely if it hadn't been archived and added to our collection. I checked back on this website a couple weeks ago, and this is now gone as well. The URL redirects to something entirely different. So I think this is a good example of the value of web archives, even over such a short time period, less than a month, and it's greatly changed. After we had begun capturing sites, we started reaching out about permissions. We decided to use a notification process for all the private organizations and give them the option to opt out of our public web archive. We didn't contact government organizations, only private organizations. We sent a letter notifying them about our web archive, giving some information on what a web archive is. We included this survey if they were interested in completing it. We got a handful, about 45 of these back, just an opportunity to add some additional information about things they were doing in response to COVID-19 that perhaps weren't reflected on their website. And then finally, in these letters, we also offered ourselves as a repository. If they had physical materials about the pandemic or about their history in general that they thought might be a good contribution to the archive, we were certainly interested in those. Again, with the idea that perhaps some of these organizations, especially some of the smaller ones, might not make it through the pandemic. If they were looking for a home for their archives, we wanted to be able to provide that. So this is where we were at the end or mid last summer. The program was up and running. And it was at this point that the pace of COVID sort of began to slow down a little bit in terms of changes, big changes to the way organizations were running. We didn't have the big lockdowns in the same way here in Minnesota that we had early on. So we sort of grew, continued this project, but grew into some new areas. So how did we grow beyond COVID from the lessons from this project? Well, first one is new collections. And this has happened in a few different ways. First, this web archiving program has helped us to build relationships with donors and with the community that have led to new collections in a couple of ways. If we have web content from organizations, we've had organizations that are interested in donating their records to us. So this, for example, is the website of the Nokomis East Neighborhood Association, which was included in our web archive. When we contacted them, they said, yes, we would be interested in contributing additional information. And we now have physical archives from the organization as well. We also have the option to present to donors of donating their physical archives, of donating their website to the archive when they donate their physical archives, which is a nice thing to be able to do as well. And secondly, we now have a working structure in place to document other spontaneous events. And specifically, this was very important in Minnesota in late spring and early summer in response to the killing of George Floyd and the events that followed. We had this set up in place. We were able to web archive content related to that tragedy as well. Secondly, we now have a new platform. As I said, we had anticipated we may move away from Conifer or at least supplement Conifer in the future, and we did. We are now using Archivit. We'd always envisioned this as a possibility, and we'd done some trials with Archivit in the past, but we were very lucky to be able to benefit from Archivit's offer of free COVID storage space for organizations collecting material related to COVID-19. And then we were even lucky again to be added to their Community Webs program. Community Webs is a grant-funded program through Archivit for public libraries that allows them to create best practices and to create web archives So we are able to be in this program for another 3 years, working with many public libraries across the country to build the web archiving programs of public libraries. We now also have a public searchable website. So we've transferred our WARC files here to Archivit. We're able to do some scheduled automatic crawling thanks to Archivit. And if you want to explore our Archivit, there is our homepage, or you can just find us through Archivit. And then finally, we have also been growing new access points. We have created metadata standards for our web archives, decided how we want to describe them within Archivit. We have benefited greatly from MLIS student volunteers and interns, practicum students helping us with this portion of the project. We've created metadata for each URL, including subject headings, descriptions, creator information. You can see some of that over on the right here. And we've also been able to integrate with the library website. So now when you go to the special collections portion of our website, you see our archival collections, you see our digital collections, you also see our web archives. Looking forward, there are a lot of things that we're excited to continue growing with this project. Most exciting is our public access component. This is ongoing. We do have a little bit of content still to be added into Archivit. We are also looking at options for integrating our web content with our finding aids, which are in archive space, and our digital collections. We have some links right now, but seeing how we want to do that going forward. We are doing automated follow-up crawls on some of these websites. So this collection is still ongoing, although the pace of it has slowed. And then we're looking to increase awareness of this project, promotion of web archives in general, promotion of our web archive, and offering ourselves as a platform to content creators and library patrons, helping patrons understand how you could use a web archive, what that might look like, developing some tools for that as well. And then finally, more proactive web archiving. We have the systems in place now to be able to respond to spontaneous events. We definitely want to continue to do that. But going back to that vertical file analogy I made early on, as web archives kind of taking on that role in some respects, we're looking at how we can do that going forward as well, how we can collect more everyday topical materials in a more systematic way that's going to document our local online community. And with that, I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Jenna. Hey, everyone. Wave at me in chat. Let me share my screen and I will start the presentation. All right, so County Historical Society. We're a small historical society in central Minnesota. We have 3 full-time humans and 3 part-time and a lot of volunteers, which of course with COVID went away. So we had to, like everyone else, shift our operations with COVID, and we developed the hashtag History Happens Now, which kind of was something that we were using ahead of time anyway, but it was an element that we could bring out much during COVID and start to get those community stories. So when we started working from home, the staff realized that there were people contacting us and just talking to us and their experiences, and we needed a way to start to gather these experiences and get them into our archive. So because most of this was digital born material, you archivists, you all know, you give people a donor number and it just works into the archive via a digital born system. We happen to use Trello as our system for collections processing. So everything comes in and then it just moves through Trello on the cards and everything gets a label. So it's easy to find in the pipeline and up different elements to it. So that goes into Collective Access, which is a program that we use in-house for researchers in order to maintain our database. There's a public facing portion of that in MN Collections. So as we were taking in these COVID stories and the History Happens Now, we were working through turning things public through MN Collections as well. So it's a little bit of background on the project in general. We started out by helping people get the idea of storytelling by doing some crazy things ourselves and telling some stories online through videos. One of my favorites was our Charles Atlas workout. We took some things from our collection that one of the Vietnam vets had taken, given us a number of years ago, and we recreated the Charles Atlas workout. So that's a really good piece of humor if you want to look that up. Just as a kickoff, I'd like to show you, it's just a 1-minute video. This was the hashtag Anoka County video that we did, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the project on the flip side of this. So we like to have fun. That's what we do. So this tour Anoka County, as you can see on the map here, which just disappeared. That's annoying. Anyway, sorry. The tour went through all 21 cities in Anoka County, and it gave us the opportunity to speak with residents and have them tell a story from their community. So we had someone go to an old water pump and talk about their family history and why that water pump was important. We had one person visit the dam and talk about why that was important to them and their community. One person visited a family cemetery. We had the Columbia Heights Field House, the Blaine Aquator. We even recreated a photo that we had in our archive when we were at Circle Pines. So it really gave the community an opportunity to look within their own family structure and what was tying them to the community. And it gave them a distraction from COVID. And we were finding that that was extremely important, especially in that April, May range where people were just being tired and the honeymoon period was wearing off and they needed something fun and engaging. With the technology that's available in their cell phones, it was accessible to most people to just take a short 2 to 5 minute video and send it to us. And some of those we translated into these tour videos, but we also use them as the Saturday showcase. Oh, goodness, there we go. Don't want to watch that again, I'm sure. So our Saturday showcase series part, we were trying to not only build up the collection from, your archiving standpoint and the community stories, but also the engagement. Our whole season of programming at the Historical Society had been canceled. So we were really trying to look for a way to engage people without doing the face-to-face programming. So these are 3 examples of the Saturday showcase that we put together. The first one is Lori Olson. She was a mom, that's her daughter there in the pink pants. She was a mom who just enjoyed chalk drawings, and she went all over her community of Andover drawing on people's driveways. And she would do sometimes 2 or 3 a day. It's a lot of chalk. People were donating chalk to her. And, she would celebrate birthdays, or she would celebrate surgeries, and, anything that people needed to pick themselves up. The middle one is Bukola and her son, Sam. They're originally from Nigeria, and they did a language lesson. And so again, they live in Ramsey. It was an immigrant story that we could tell, brought some programming to people, and just really gave people an opportunity for some distraction to COVID, but also again, contributed to our collection. There was also a number of businesses that were struggling during COVID, and Blue Sun Soda on the right-hand side was one of those businesses. They were devising new ways to reach their audiences and different ways to do curbside pickup and still have fun and be a unique business in Anoka County. So these Saturday showcase videos turned into an opportunity for us to document the business stories as well as the individual stories because of COVID. Because Sarah, that's the human that you saw in the Civil War dress trying to get in and out of the car. Sarah Given has the visual storytelling skills. So much of that fell to her to do the editing of those video documents and the filming that people brought in. And then my background is in writing and telling stories through the written word. So my job was focusing more on the blog and newspaper articles during the COVID months. And so we were, again, reaching out to people to give them an opportunity to tell their story. These are a sample of some of the blog articles, which were also printed in the local newspaper at the time. There was FedEx delivery people and nurses, and the middle picture with all of the signs was manage that story without being near your spouse. That one still just cuts me. Sorry about that. The top picture there was another immigrant by the name of Nyakade. That's her aunt back in South Sudan. And they didn't have any protections against COVID. So Nyakade was writing for us about her different viewpoint of COVID and how it was affecting her international family. And then we had stories about the shelves. Lots of stores had empty shelves and what that felt like as an American to witness things like that we don't typically have in our consciousness. Empty shelves are not something we generally experience. That bottom right-hand image was from the Hans Bakery on Easter. They had the up over right now. This is part of our Trello board that I was talking about earlier of how we manage the collections processing. So all of these colored lines, those all indicate different points in the accession process in the labeling. So you can imagine what it looked like during COVID with all of the various stories coming in. What we have created online in order to present all of this information is an online exhibit. So if you go to our website and you find the online history gather and you click on that, and it turns up a selection of survey results. We actually did 3 different surveys that were successful, April, May, and June. And the first survey had 230 responses. And so you can see from this that there was about 69 people that weren't working and were without pay at that point. And so we went through these surveys using SurveyMonkey, and we had the prompt on the website. And we were really surprised at how honest people were. This particular graph, you can see just how people were feeling. And there was a lot of awareness, but still some fear and frustration. So this was in April. By May and June, those same answers had shifted a lot, and there was a lot more anger and a lot more resignation on these bars right here in the middle of the graph. Our numbers continued to drop. Also, we noticed that the second survey only had 137 responses, and by the third survey, it was only 66 responses. So from that, we can deduce that people were timing out with COVID. They were fatiguing. It wasn't fun anymore. And so to take that time to do the survey was just difficult. And it's still open. You can still find it on our website here in the Take Your Survey. We have a few trickle in every now and again, but certainly nothing like it was in April, May, and June. The Tell Your Experience box is here also, and that just goes to a gather form that people can submit. It goes straight into our email, and we can transfer that over to the archive. But this page, as you can see, is a selection of quotes that we just collected and put on the website for people to look at. Some people gave us photos. We have some items like masks that are being donated to us now, but we're staying away from the physical items at the moment. We're trying to get rid of some backlog, to be honest with you. But this page goes for a long time, and there's some painful information in here. There's some uplifting information. People noting, like this one, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you lose me?
You were talking a little bit about some of the responses from your surveys, as well as from the history gathered portion.
Okay, sounds good. I will jump ahead then to the podcast. I'm sorry about that, technology. One of the ways we're using this to move forward is by creating a podcast. And this particular episode of Gina Overacker is a really great example of the groundwork that we did in March, April, May. Gina filled out one of our surveys, and then her husband died just the beginning of January from COVID. And we did an oral interview with her, and we were able to compare her responses from the beginning of the pandemic to when she lost her husband. We'll never be able to have a perspective from Gina that doesn't include Terry's death. So the fact that we got that perspective before he passed away is just a really crucial example of how important this History Gather project is. So I would just encourage everyone to, whether it's small or large, whether you have lots of space in your archive or not very much at all, every little bit helps, and I just encourage you to do whatever you can. So thank you so much, and I will pass it back as well. Adam?
Yeah, thank you everyone for your presentations. That was all wonderful. We do have a couple of questions, and this one might be directed towards you, Jennifer, or Jenna, I'm sorry. Did you all use Conifer to capture any social media sites / feeds?
It's a good question. We did not for this project, but we did capture some social media in the days after the murder of George Floyd. We specifically avoided social media for COVID in large part because it was just so difficult to capture. If you've tried using capturing social media, it's varying levels of success. So we were able to successfully capture some Facebook pages. We weren't able to capture much Twitter, some Twitter that was not on Twitter, but through a different site, like the if it was embedded in something, or the Minnesota Public Radio had a Twitter feed that was like an amalgamation of Twitter feeds that was hosted on their website. I think that captured a little bit better, but Twitter and YouTube actually as well had gone through updates that Conifer hadn't caught up to yet at that point. So it might be working better now. We have some problems capturing social media with Archivit too. So if anyone has great ideas for social media or great platforms, I'm very interested in hearing them. That's still kind of a challenge for us, and I'm guessing for everybody. Is that?
Thank you. So another question, if you have any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat as well, or I mean in the Q&A as well. Otherwise, just kind of generally to all the panelists, what surprised you most about your projects, or what was something that was very surprising to you? And any one of you can take it if you'd like.
I can jump in quick. I guess from our perspective as a County Historical Society, what surprised me most was the willingness for people to share very intimate stories and fears and concerns, and to trust us with those emotions during a really tough time in history.
I think for me, one of the biggest surprises, if that's a right question, is maybe the sheer amount of content we received over the course of our project. We were seeing content come in on a pretty regular basis, but when we really started quantifying it for reporting, it just was a little, I don't want to say overwhelming, but just truly amazing. And then knowing how broadly that the interviews and experiences were coming from all over, not just our community, but they're somehow connected to our students, was really powerful.
There were a lot of things that surprised me. One that comes to mind was just the variety in websites and the variety in responses. So we would come across websites where there hadn't been anything updated COVID related, and I can hypothesize a variety of reasons why that might be. There were a lot that had all kinds of changes and things that were different and that were changing a lot. And just the different responses. Places of worship are a good example. There were, when we first did the crawls in around the spring holidays last year, everyone was online. We did another round of crawls around December of this year, and it was a real mixed bag. Some people were back in person seemingly without much in the way of COVID information at all on their website. Some were still entirely online. So it was neat to see that variety in web content and also in responses.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Yeah, I think that was one of my biggest surprises during our whole project was like, just again to like echoing what was said before, but just the emotion that people would put into their writing as well as their oral histories, and how that kind of changed a little bit too, kind of over. And our project pretty much stopped roughly in August for the most part. We still get a few trickles here and there, but just how everything kind of changed emotionally wise. And then, like I said, just how willing people were to express their emotions and share those emotions with us. And I think for us having, allowing people to have anonymous submissions really helped aid that in some aspects, because then people were willing to talk a little bit more, especially since a lot of them were international students, and how they could be afraid of, things kind of getting back a little bit in a sense. So just kind of having that feature allowed a lot of people to really express and share some of the emotions that they would want to share. Otherwise, and then this was kind of some of you kind of addressed this a little bit too, but another kind of question we can ask is what has been the hardest or most challenging part of your projects, either now or maybe even kind of looking at them kind of going into the future? What are some hard or challenging aspects of your projects?
For us, I would say we have two challenges. The biggest one was during the project was honestly management of all of the students. Even though the archives team wasn't directly supervising the work of the students, it became all of the archives team ended up being like resources for all of the supervisors, and then was leading weekly trainings, developing weekly professional development. I mean, it was great, but it was also, we weren't really doing archives things. I mean, we were answering questions, we were facilitating and managing the project. That was the bulk of our summer, last summer. And it was exhausting. The other thing that I think was most challenging is we have not yet been able to provide access to much of the content that we've collected. We want to provide access, but we really want to, as Adam mentioned, a lot of people chose to be anonymous. There are a lot of restrictions, and we want to really make sure we're not only make sure, but we have to make sure we honor those, but also do it in a way that we really feels like it is presenting the information holistically. So we're still working on that piece. And some people have been very interested to see it right away, and we're not ready for it right away.
Our challenges at Anoka are, I feel on myself, actually, we made so many relationships with the people that donated the materials. It's draining. It's emotionally draining to keep up with all of their stories. I use Gina as an example. You know, we were talking with her daily while Terry was in the hospital for that month. You know, and so you really absorb people's lives, and it becomes part of the workflow. And I mean, it's a gift on so many levels, but on others, just that emotional commitment to the relationships that got built.
I can think of a few things, but probably the most challenging aspect now is the technical aspect, in the sense of last spring, this was a wonderful project to have when we were working from home and there weren't some of the things that we normally do that we couldn't do. But now we're back to doing those things, and this project is there as well. So it's kind of, we have a lot of captures from last spring. We don't have as many from last fall or this spring. And that's something I'm still kind of deciding, should we be doing additional crawls of some of this material now? What would that look like? And if we did them in Archivit, we'd need to make sure that the process still works with that platform to test those URLs again. And frankly, a lot of the URLs have changed. People had unique COVID websites last March. They don't anymore. Now it's just part of their normal homepage. At the time, I assume a lot of people thought, you know, we're only going to need this up for a little bit. We'll just create this page specifically for it. And then at some point they thought, you know what, let's just put it on the main homepage. So that would be an additional step to identify where that content is if we were going to try to grab it again.
Yeah, thank you so much for kind of discussing some of your challenges that you all faced as part of this part of your projects. It looks like we have about a minute left for today, so thank you so much to all of our participants today, and thank you to everyone for coming to our session. If you have questions for us, please feel free to reach out. Here is some of our contact information. And again, and if you have, like I said, if you want to reach out, talk to us about them, or have any other future ideas or collaboration opportunities, please feel free to let us know, and have a wonderful day and rest of your conference.